How's everyone doing? We're so excited to be here talking about the changing nature of media, just a small topic like that. Before I have these esteemed panelists introduce themselves, let me just try and set this up. I mean, this is something that we certainly think about from a Mastercard standpoint. I mean, the industry is rapidly changing. We're all feeling it. On one dimension, we have brand trust. Consumer trust in brands is at an all-time low. At the same time, we think about consumer attention spans that are today less than a goldfish, less than 8 seconds. And so you combine that with, I think, just this energy that we're all feeling, that, as an industry, we've never moved this fast, but unfortunately, we're never going to move this slow again. And then, what is really propelling that, I think, is just all this new technological innovation. And so that leads to lots of questions of just, what is media? How do we think about, security and transparency and trust, different trading models? And ultimately, as employees, like, what are the skill sets that we need to have? And so those are a lot of the questions that we're going to try and tackle today. So with that said, let me hand it over to these folks, and we'll do a little introduction before we get into the questions.
Hi, my name is John Piccone. I'm the regional president for Adform. We are the second largest DSP and ad server globally, based out of Denmark and based here in New York City.
Hi, everybody. Michael Dobson. I'm with AMS. I'm the global chief digital officer. We are a media solutions company with a barter trade model as well as a AOR model as well.
And I'm Erin Foxworthy. I'm an industry principal at Snowflake for marketing and advertising. Snowflake is a data cloud platform, largest software IPO in history in 2019, and about 10,000 clients.
Okay, let's, Erin, let's start with you. Let's kind of go back to this idea around kind of trust and kind of unpack that. So, we believe that there's just an increasing consumer demand for authenticity and transparency. In that respect, how can brands, how can companies and publishers ensure that their messaging resonates while still standing out in a crowded market? How do we really break through an authentic, trustworthy way?
Yeah, I'm going to take it always from a data platform perspective, because I'm always a former marketer, but not a marketer. I think what we're noticing is that brands are realizing that to understand what's working is they need transparency and they need detailed data to understand either what's performing from an ad perspective and also what's performing from a creative perspective. But before you even get down to the point of getting the metadata, organizing the metadata, negotiating your ad log contracts, what's happening a lot at the front end is, how are you actually respecting your consumer data? Right? How are you collecting it? Are you actually getting consent of that data? And then as you move downstream, you're building your trust there, right? You're building trust at your data platform before you're even activating your consumer data, right? So the collection and the consent and building the trust actually starts at the first moment you touch a consumer, even before, right, you move downstream to actually activate that.
I think that's right. I mean, I know that this team spends a lot of time thinking about, kind of data architecture, data management. I think it'd be great, Michael and John, if you had, kind of points of view on just, really how you guys are thinking about, kind of data and data architecture, kind of through that light around transparency and trust.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we really look at from a measurement standpoint is, how do you tell a story of what you're looking at from all the data? Because there's so much in regards to the different KPIs, and everybody goes to market with their primary KPIs. But what are the others that are actually telling some of the story, where we can look at it from a more holistic standpoint? And I think we get a little too locked into, did we meet the one primary KPI, and we don't look at the bigger picture of how it actually impacts, lifetime value of net new consumers or whatever it may be for a business model. So I think that storytelling of measurement is a huge opportunity for us as we get more and more data, and sometimes we just don't do our best of looking at the broader picture of it.
Yeah. If I can just ask a follow-up question on that. I mean, I think kind of this idea of storytelling around data, kind of bringing a little bit of, kind of the magic and the logic together. It's very easy, I think, kind of in this day and age of, kind of just algorithmic trading and, just this idea of automation, of kind of forgetting a little bit of the bigger picture and what we're trying to accomplish. And I guess, kind of maybe what tips or tricks you have of how to do effective storytelling with the data.
Yeah, I think earlier someone spoke, the CMO from Figs spoke, and we all who were in the room, we saw the lovely, piece that they put out of market. And someone asked a question on measurement and if they, valued or if they saw what they got back from it. So I'm not saying that exactly right, but you get the point. And I think it's a great example of, did they see it right away in regards to the cost efficiency and the people who were tuned in? Like, obviously you can measure that reach of what it was, but if they're going to actually make a movement to a new healthcare, or in the healthcare sector of getting, new facilities or whatever it may be to actually purchase huge quantities of their inventory 6 months from now or a year from now, like that's actually looking at a little bit of the bigger picture. And if people actually connected to remember the brand, if they didn't know it, if they were introduced. Some of these things sound very basic, right? But I think we do forget sometimes when we're primarily focused on that one KPI of what, is the wrap-up report and did we meet the CPM, and checking the box yes or no, versus are we revisiting it from a long-term perspective?
These darn brands just keep asking for efficiencies.
Oh, we love it.
I love it. All right, so John, why don't we pivot a little bit? I mean, we've been kind of talking a little bit of how we are evolving as an industry, and we have new tools. AI is kind of one of those tools. But how are we thinking about kind of this advancement in technology, the rapid pace that we're moving at, and being able to deliver solutions in a way that we can still deliver kind of trust and transparency?
So I'd probably take it a step just real quickly. We talk about content being king, and therefore that would mean that advertisers are queen and their offspring is a consumer, right? So we have this triptych relationship. But most people in this room don't represent just those three. We do as consumers, but we don't represent them in all the other. I clearly don't as an advertising technology vendor. And so when you think about that, we have now the government coming forward and representing the consumer a little bit when it comes to big data and what's going on there. You have advertisers that are reaching more out for saying, hey, I'd like some of that data. And you have publishers that are trying to figure out well, wait a second, I think I gave way too much to begin with and my rates have been coming down. We've seen the impact on journalism and all of that stuff. So we have, like most families, a natural tension that's going on out there. And so if we use that as a baseline, and now we try and talk about how we're going to optimize that, I think, and you threw in the word AI, I think we're entering to a point of a passion economy where we have an opportunity to leverage AI as we as professionals individually and have points of view to look at what the past has brought forward to where we got to today. Because if you ever played with ChatGPT and you can go and be like, tell me about the history of Coca-Cola's marketing, right? You have your answer. And then how does that impact what my goals are? You have answers that are so quick. So we are the leaders of the future based, the technologies have been outsourced into our hands and then scaling our own respective platforms to then bring forth this relationship of this is how I'm going to make this triptych stronger of these three. I think it's super exciting. I mean, we're on the dawn of leveraging all of the hard work we've been doing for the past 40 years in digital advertising-ish. And it's a very bright future.
Yeah, Erin, I think, probably a strong point of view on that coming from Snowflake and how you're thinking about that triptych, and also thinking about, how you are leveraging, kind of those strong signals that you're getting to create better propensity modeling.
Yeah, I'll take that in a few different ways. I think the first one to think about is that Snowflake's data platform bought a company called Neeva. The CEO is Sridhar, who is actually now our CEO. He was actually former head of Google Ads. And the first thing we're doing is let's just make it easier for the data engineers to write SQL, bring in Copilot, leverage our own AI capabilities so that you're going to see the movement in the data engineering space is going to go so much faster. Because if you think about it, database language is based on SQL. That knowledge that we have on SQL, we're the best in the world. So if we make it easier for data engineer to write SQL, what you're going to start to see is data and applications move faster because we're making it easier within our own platform. But then on top of that, what you're seeing is marketers are saying, okay, I have all these amazing signals, right? I'm bringing in from my web, bringing in from my mobile app, right? I'm bringing in from my call center data, name the point of, consumer touch point. And now you're bringing that into a data platform. that's easier to use and faster. So what you're starting to see is actually AI come on top of that data and start to learn. You're learning about customer journeys or learning about segmentation instantaneously that can be fed to downstream, right, engagement platforms. So the second piece is AI is going to make you a smarter marketer because you're going to know signals and patterns you've never seen around your customers because you've unified that data in a platform that can handle the scale and it can bring AI to it. Right? And then the last part is, which I get really interested in, is what's the intersection between creative and that data? So if I know a customer journey and I know a segment, and I know that segment loves a certain type of product, but I can see it overlaps with another type of segment, now how do I prompt some of my creative generation? Right? It's happening in platform, but those platforms don't have all your signals, right? As marketers, you have your signals. So I think that's going to be kind of the next wave we start to see.
Just a follow-up on that. I mean, I think what we're touching upon is this nice blending of, sort of magic and logic. I mean, I think that's the beauty of marketing is that it pulls on both the left side and the right side of the brain. With that said, as we delve further into technological innovation, and a lot of what you guys are talking about is really figuring out how to do better data architecture and to create better propensity modeling and better signals, which is fairly complex and technical. And maybe there's a lot of us that didn't have that background coming into marketing. Marketing might have been more on that magic side than the logic side that attracted a lot of us to begin with. And what are all of you kind of seeing as sort of the skill sets that not only kind of you need to have on your side, but when you are pulling up and having those conversations with advertisers and marketers, to ensure that we are taking advantage of kind of all of this depth and breadth of knowledge. Like, what are the skill sets that we need to have moving forward?
I'll answer you as well as play off a little bit of what Erin was saying. I think one of the interesting parts whenever you think about digital media specifically, and I've been in the bid-based environment forever now, and a lot of people who are doing hands-on keyboard and optimizing and on the back end and doing the analytics, if you know those types of people, they're a little more back-end related and not always thinking of the larger picture from a business perspective. And one of the awesome things that we're looking at that can help us from an AI standpoint to answer the creative portion of that too is telling the insights that actually connect back to potentially the impact of the business. Not only what you're getting within the platform and what a consumer's doing. So it's kind of like if you create that third bubble of crossover that Erin was describing, where it's actually the other factors, weather, politics, Sunday night football, whatever may be happening that interferes with potentially that consistency that you see generally with your media. So I think that that's one of those things that is one more thing for everybody to keep up with. But if we actually leverage AI, with the insights and the intelligence behind it to connect back to the media with the audience segmentation that we're all doing these days, that will help tell more of that story and help us plan as well as measure a little more efficiently from an AI perspective.
Yeah, I think the innovation's happening on the algorithmic level. I mean, it went from 30 seconds now to 6 seconds to your point with the goldfish, right? So now the algorithms, have they made 6 seconds the new 30-second, or has the creative made it? Right? So it's a combo. It's always going to be a combo. And I think that it's really tough for marketers to figure out, do I just keep doing these sixes? But I can't because I need to build my overall arching narrative of my story. And that's not done overnight. That's not done in 6 seconds. That takes a whole bunch of time to actually build. So you're constantly playing with these algorithms in which are out of our control. And they're purposefully out of our control because back to that triptych, none of these other folks are going to give that control back to any of the primary stakeholders. They're going to keep it to themselves because they need to run a business. And I think that this is the pressure in the ecosystem. And I think only brands are going to be able to figure out like, hey, I'm measuring this on my outcomes because I can go put it into a big, deep Snowflake, and then I can go see what's actually working. If they can't get that data, it's just going to be a 6-second world.
I totally agree. But going back to the question on what you need, I would say it's curiosity. So I live in the world now of data engineers and data scientists, but I have a business background. My SQL is limited. I can write it. I'm not amazing at it. But I think what you need to be is really, really curious. because there's no reason why a business user can't understand what's happening in a database, right? The fundamentals are business logic, and you need to be curious, because I will tell you right now, the data engineers and the data scientists don't know how to translate to ad tech and martech and what's going on in media. They cannot translate. So what you need to be able to do is speak a little bit of their language and be able to translate your language. And if you're curious and you're spending that extra time about just watching what's happening, it's going to make you dangerous, because that's the translation piece that I see at Snowflake so much. It's like, we have this data, what does this data mean? And anyone in the business side will be like, oh, I can learn X, Y, and Z. Right? But I need to apply the data this way. So that's what I'm noticing. It's really just the bridge between the technical to the business. And to me, that really just stems from curiosity.
I love that. I think, there's a lot of people now that hire for that curiosity quotient now. It was IQ, then went to EQ, and now I think CQ is really where we're hiring. So I totally agree with that. I just kind of want to go back to a little bit of a sub-theme that I'm hearing there, which is, as we evolve as an industry, I mean, there's a little bit of tension that exists, some healthy tension as we think about, how to take on board all of these new signals, or, really start to build a new type of MarTech and tech stack with new tools, and, how we start to reconcile that with outcomes and being able to kind of prove all these things out. At the same time, like as we advance as an industry and we get kind of better at targeting and maybe moving towards something that feels like more kind of personalization, consumers also react and push back. One of the things that we notice, when we were doing kind of eye tracking studies or heat maps, we can have some of the best targeting in the world and negotiate some very favorable rates with certain kind of media buys on either the open web or not. But ultimately, kind of consumers are bombarded with kind of over 10,000 ads, 20,000 ads a day, up from 500 20 years ago. And there's kind of physical ad blockers that people are kind of putting on their computers to kind of push out the noise, but then there's also kind of these mental ad blockers that we have, because we have to just parse the kind of the information that we have. And so as we advance, I think there's always that push and pull, and it's really just more of kind of a broad question of kind of how we are thinking about kind of leveraging these tools to the benefit of consumers. Ultimately, kind of consumers sit in the center, and all of us are in service of kind of that end consumer to go kind of sell the products or sell the services that we need. And I guess curious how you guys are thinking about that, and maybe just some perspective on what you're hearing as briefs and some of the solutions that you guys are thinking about.
I'll go. So, it starts with how is a brand growing? What part of are they in the growth trajectory? How much media can they afford? Right? So if you're just starting out and you just raised your first Series A and you only have a little bit of money and you're trying to figure out where your product sticks, right? Search is wonderful. It's super cheap, super effective, showing that the product's landing. I can show the checkout. I can show the value, return on ad spend. And then I start to get more scale with that, and now I have to move up the food chain and media buying into CPM eventually, just to jump to that. And so now you have to waste media. And the waste of media is where driving a story becomes super duper critical, because now you couldn't just get the CPA to satisfy your investors. You need to go into a CPM and translate a CPM to CPA. A lot of media metrics going on here, but that's the world that we live in. So how do we drive from a CPA to a CPM? It's the data in between the two, and then you have your creative story. So I think it really begins with your relationship with your investors, clearly, your historical spend and what worked in the past, right? I mean, you've had much more experience than I have, but you have the 70-20-10 rules, 70 the same, 20 a little bit different, and 10 brand new, right? So I think the curiosity piece, or CQ, which you said, which I love, is what's driving this. Kind of a lame answer, but that's what I got.
Yeah, I'll go next. And again, I'm always taking from a data perspective, always. So two things I see happening when it gets into how a marketer is leveraging data to understand oversaturation or consumer mindset. So the first one is a lot of smart brands who are very deep with their privacy teams are only activating aggregate. So they're only actually activating audiences at a segmentation level that they feel is not going to saturate or where they actually know an individual consumer. So a lot of testing going on, and can I get the same granularity in aggregates than I can at an individual level? I would say the other one, and this goes back to what we talked about earlier, is the transparency of the ad logs. What's my frequency? And not just what's my frequency in that channel, what's my frequency across my whole ad buy? Because now I can understand a true saturation, even if I'm at a segment level, to understand if I'm over hitting that person a million times. Then there's obviously the qualitative surveys and other things like that. But from a data perspective, that's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, and just to build on that, I think the one thing in addition that could help, from a overall perspective is just change, right? Driving change. Like so many times we lock into like a whole quarter of a buy that's on a media plan, it's signed off and it's like locked in. But I think a lot of times brands don't challenge their agencies, and agencies don't have enough flexibility to actually drive what needs to happen for everything that Erin was just describing of the learnings that we're getting early on. And for direct response, hopefully everybody's already doing that. But I think even in the CPG world, and just from a reach and awareness standpoint, having test and learn plans and learning quickly on the creative, and seeing where you can leverage creative that maybe has more flexibility. Influencer marketing obviously is a huge opportunity where you can get assets within a matter of days. So if things aren't working, how do you actually plan and change things a little more efficient to drive that at a quicker pace versus locking into a whole quarter?
I love that. Yeah. So we are nearing the end. I think we covered a ton of ground. Why don't we just end by doing a little speed round here? We'll kind of break out the magic 8-ball or crystal ball here. So looking ahead, we think about kind of like the next 5 years and the trends that we're seeing today and that are shaping the industry. How do we prepare ourselves for what's ahead? What do we see as the major trends, and how do we adapt? Why don't we start with Erin?
Oh man. We're at really of a tip of a spear at Snowflake, so it's like I get to see kind of, I don't know. I think I personally feel I'm a little bit ahead of the 8-ball that's sitting on the table, the globe, knowing what's going on. This is kind of conceptual, but I want you to think about, we all buy SaaS applications, right? We buy ad tech stacks, we buy MarTech stacks. Those stacks are going to move closer to the data. That data sits in the cloud. So that's the first trend. It's already happening. So if you think about, I need a data layer and I'm going to run SaaS applications on top of that. The second piece we're going to see is that SaaS is going to look a lot easier to build when there's AI. So can you think about someone that's non-technical, if the data's there, building an application, thinking about SaaS just because they have the mindset to do it and they have AI agents that can build it. So it's a little futuristic, but we get to see it. It's coming.
I think one of the biggest changes from the agency side that we'll see in the next 2 years, even to 5, is actual jobs. The entry level of what's needed is no longer going to be the same thing. So, from a FTE standpoint, you may have had 5 assistants on a piece of business before, and maybe you only need 2, or maybe there's no assistant. Maybe all of that's automated, and it just goes to the next level. So. Everything is going to level up from automation, obviously, and it's going to change the amount of people we need on business, the new entry level of who's working on, our businesses and how they're actually driving that change in everything we do in advertising.
Yeah, that's a great one. I think the transparency train is on the tracks. I think that people are going to get more insight into where their marketing dollars are going and how they work. And once they get that, they're going to be able to break down the reach and frequency curves that they need, and there's going to be more pressure on that. And once they do that, we're going to see that there's probably 40 to 50% too much money in the market because of the waste of the frequency. And I think we're going to see a big culling of companies, unfortunately, in the context where that frequency is not going to be able to support the ecosystem anymore because it's going to be more. And then that's going to go into creative development because they're going to know their actual effective frequency. And then that's what's going to scale the creative power.
I think that's a good place to end. I mean, what we're talking about here is, kind of SaaS changing nature of jobs, changing nature of the ecosystem, thinking about that balancing of, kind of pure media versus that blending of media and creativity, which I think is a good place to end. I want to thank this esteemed panel.
Thank you, Jay.
Talking about the future of media.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.